Great. So tonight's class is going to focus on customer discovery, which is all about getting out of the building metaphorically in a COVID scenario and talking to people about the ideas you have and the potential solutions and trying to get as much feedback as you can from additional people to decide if this is actually a good idea and a good solution and if it's worth solving. So we're going to start off with just a couple folks sharing some of their favorite ideas that they came up with this week. So we'll go to that. We'll talk a little bit about the readings, and then we'll go through customer discovery, best practices, and we'll have a fun breakout room activity toward the end of class where we'll put you guys in pairs to practice customer interviewing one another. So let's kind of, hold on, let me unshare this actually. Before we get into the readings, I want to hear from you all a couple of the ideas. So let's start off with that. Does anybody have an idea that they came up with over the past week that they want to share with the class? Andres?
Yeah, it's an idea for academics and like researchers to like have an application that creates like a metaphorical like tree of like where things have been cited so that they could like visually place how often something is cited in like a certain field or see like which paper should I jump to next in reading.
Yeah, I love that idea. I can picture the data visualization web. I think that'd be really helpful. Sam, how about you?
Yeah, I think I was thinking about this this week about how you can like track your AirPods if they're in the case, but it's not really if I lose them, it's like not in the case. It's the actual like the specific
his AirPods.
pods.
Yeah, okay. I think that would be quite helpful because when you lose one, it's pretty hard to find. Jacob, how about you?
Yeah, so I'm not sure if something similar to this already exists, but I was thinking like a smart running shoe that like senses where you're stressing your foot, so hopefully would be able to prevent injury.
So like the whole bottom of the foot would have sensors on it, not just like a where did you run, map my run type thing, but like the...
Right, yeah, it'd be like a force sensor on the bottom of your foot kind of thing.
Cool, that's a great idea. I'm gonna tell my wife about that when she's has dreams of starting a shoe business one day. So we'll cut you in on it if we actually do anything with it, Jacob. Thea, how about you?
So, okay, this is kind of embarrassing. Like I do dad jokes, like puns all the time, and it's like almost a problem. And like I really want a board game, like just designated to how many puns can you make off of like a word or an idea.
I love this idea. I would buy and play this game on like a weekly basis. And it's a great segue for me to ask you guys if you've heard about this new kids show. So it's about a child whose father actually is a monster that lives under a bridge. It's called Paw Patrol. Oof. And I'm going to segue over to Avery and see what your idea is.
So I was thinking kind of for photography purposes, a software feature on your phone camera that would beep or something like that when you had your phone at the perfect or optimal angle and lighting for a photo. So it would kind of just make photography easier and better.
I love it. Rohan, how about you?
This is very futuristic, but a holographic Zoom.
Okay, so we're talking like Star Wars, like it just kind of shows up and you got a little guy. I support it. Sounds awesome. Abby?
I saw a video where a guy with cerebral palsy got like a custom shirt made for him that with like magnetic buttons. So like a store that was all like clothing built for people with disabilities.
I love that. That's amazing. And was that with Button Helper? Was that the company? Have you heard of Button Helper? Let me start there.
I haven't heard of Button Helper, but I don't think the video didn't say like the company that did it.
So there's actually a Georgetown alum who just started a company in the past couple of years called Button Helper. And it may have been that video where it's like magnet buttons for people who have disabilities. And there's what is it? Zappos Adaptive. If you Google them, they have a deal with them to distribute their products. And actually one of the entrepreneurs I'm working with at Halcyon right now is a company called No Limits, but it's LIMB, like limb bits. And she's an amputee who got in a car accident in college and lost her leg and is now making clothing for all sorts of people with disabilities to, be able to find fashionable things. So I love that idea, Abby. That's awesome. How about you, Jorge?
Yeah, so I've been buying professional clothing for an internship I have in the summer, and one thing I thought it'd be really cool to have like a subscription tie service where maybe you can buy like a set of ties, maybe like swap them out when you get bored of it or something like that.
Yeah, I love that too. Chloe, we'll go to you next.
I'm dog sitting right now, and I've never had dogs before, and one of the most annoying parts of it is like waking up at 5 a.m. to let them out to pee. So my idea is like a doggy door that only opens when the dog's collar is like nearby.
Okay.
So that you can still have like the house locked up, but the dog can get out and you don't have to bother.
So it's kind of like an electric fence with an electric like wormhole where the dog can escape, but it's not going to let burglars in. Cool. Awesome. So great ideas. I love it. And I love kicking off class with some fresh ideas to get people's brains in the right state of mind. Would love to hear a couple thoughts from folks about the readings on the book by John Jabara on mastering customer interviews for entrepreneurs, as well as there's like a 10-minute video on conducting customer interviews. What's one thing that you learned about customer interviews from those materials? Maya?
I think in both the reading / audiobook and that video, just the importance of listening and trying to confirm your suspicions, but without like resisting the urge to talk. So really taking it in and listening to what others have to say instead of what you think they're going to say.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's absolutely right. Pia, how about you?
I was just gonna say, I think it was from the video clip, like, I think something I took away from it was like, no matter how excited or eager you are about like what you're trying to convey, you have to like restrain that a little bit, because if you go in like, I don't know what like euphemism I'm trying to use. Like if you hit the ground running, that's going to prevent the other person from like leaning in and giving you the information you're actually seeking out. So I thought that was useful.
Yeah, that's a great point. And you don't want to like be so excited you bring them to exactly the thing you want them to say. Kind of see how do they navigate the problem. Sam, how about you?
Yeah, I think just emphasizing like at the end of the day, it's all just about a conversation. Like especially I've noticed that like in journalism, like in interviewing people, you can go straight to your questions, but you probably won't get the answers that you want. Whereas if you like treat it like a normal conversation, like have some icebreakers, like ask them how their day is going, just like involve more real life stuff into a pitch or conversation, then it'll help a lot more.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And you're a human talking to another human. These are not like robot interviews. And I think investing a couple minutes on the front end to build a little rapport and get to know them and, oh, where are you from? I think goes a long way to then them opening up and willing to share more. Bushra, how about you?
Yeah, just to build on that, I think that like on the topic of the other person or the customer is actually another human. I thought from the video, one of the takeaways that was interesting was how he said that like you're not an accountant, you're not just collecting like what customers want to see exactly in your product, and instead you should be immersing yourself in like their lives and how they spend their lives from morning to night. That way you can actually get to truly know like who your customers are, even if it's not directly related to the product that you're trying to sell them or get information from them about.
Yeah, fantastic point. And it's so valuable too, because I want to teach you to fall in love with your customers and with their pain points, to not fall in love with your solution. Because if you learn more about a day in the life and like what are they actually dealing with, there may be other things that are much more significant problems that you could come up with a solution that would be way more valuable than your initial idea. Alex, how about you?
Yeah, so this was something, and you might know her, but like Jill Monk, sorry, I have COVID, so I'm a little like ill. But one thing that she like imparted on me, I actually worked for her, was like, you want to ask questions that like get people to tell stories, because otherwise you could just like send out a survey monkey and get like a yes or no response. The point of taking the time to actually go through like each person is to like actively like get them to like impart a piece of their life to you, which I feel like is really cool to do in a customer discovery interview.
Yep, absolutely. The open-ended questions that can get stories flowing. There's a lot you can learn from those. Kai?
To kind of go off of Alex's point, one interesting thing I saw in the reading was that it advised you actually go back to folks that you have already interviewed, even if it's a couple people, and just check in again about what the work is that they're doing, if they think the pricing is right and things like that, especially because there can be such a big amount of time between actually like evaluating the interviews and then implementing the product or getting there. So I think to check back in also really builds like rapport for your company.
Absolutely, and that's a sneak preview of the breakout room activity we're going to do later, where one of the things at the end is asking, hey, is it okay if I follow up with you, later on in this project as it progresses? You kind of want them to buy in and be on some level invested in your success and wanting to continue to support you. One of the best analogies about startups is the idea that you're in this canoe and you've got like your startup canoe and you're paddling, and then you do a customer interview, you kind of talk to somebody, and in some senses, you're inviting them into the canoe, and then you keep paddling. And then eventually, a little while down the road, you're like, hey, I've got this extra paddle. Do you want to help paddle with me? And then maybe they can help paddle and get that momentum to go forward and perhaps launch the product or tell people in their network about it. They can also be great sources of referrals for other people to interview. If you're trying to interview nurses, a nurse works with a bunch of other nurses, maybe she can introduce you to some folks. Rohan, we'll go to you and then we'll get into the slides.
Yeah, I don't know if it's the right time to ask a question, but Steve Jobs says like the customer doesn't know what he or she's looking for. So this was like a very different angle to reading the podcast, the video. So I'm just like wondering your take on that statement.
Steve Jobs' brain power was like infinitely more than all of ours combined in his ability to like visualize what the solution is that the customer could not. I think he has a very valid point that they don't know what the solution looks like. Like nobody wanted a car, they wanted faster horses is like the other analogy. So there is a level of like making a leap to a new thing. What is really important about customer discovery interviews is validating the problem, and that like for cars, like it's the transportation. Like we got to go from my house to my aunt's house. How are we going to get there? A faster horse or a car? So I think there's that element of it. I'm trying to think of like an iPod, iPhone analogy, and my brain isn't quite connecting the dots there. Like he wanted to put music in your pocket, and he hated phone companies, but then eventually was like, oh, okay, maybe there is something there. So don't expect the customer or customer interviews to describe exactly what the solution should look like. Focus on what are their problems and pain points, and then adapt for that. Cool. All right, so we went over the readings. We are focusing on the right side of the business model canvas, and how does the company create value? What's the value proposition? You're going to start building relationships with potential customers. You're going to think about what are the different customer segments and who do you want to try to talk to. If you are coming up with, let's say an adaptive clothing solution, you don't necessarily want to talk to somebody who doesn't have a disability or doesn't have anybody in their family that could benefit from that solution. This is also going to tie into the revenue and understanding how much have customers paid historically for similar solutions to solve this problem. So I don't ever want you in these interviews to ask, hey, this is my idea for a new type of tea. Would you pay $5 for this type of tea? You want to ask, in the past 12 months, how much money have you spent buying refreshing drinks that are not water? Or in the past week or month, try to understand the frequency with which they make this type of purchase and what are they doing now to solve the problem. And so in sort of the life cycle of developing a business, we're going to spend a lot of time in this class in these first two cycles doing laps around customer discovery and validation. And until you really validate that you have a good understanding of who your customers are and what types of solutions they need, we're not going to get into the customer creation and company building phase. I'm optimistic that we can get there eventually, but I want to set expectations that a big part of this class is going to be you all talking to potential customers and iterating and refining your ideas and learning how to talk to humans that would actually use it and not just like hide behind a survey monkey or things like that. Diving a little bit deeper, you've got problem solution fit is the first thing that you're looking for. So you want to confirm you understand what the problem is and validate or invalidate the solution you've got. We'll talk about coming up with an MVP, which is not a Lamar Jackson. It is a minimum viable product. And then think about what are the different funnels in which you can kind of attract and acquire potential customers and get them to actually convert. And when we get to the sales lecture a little later in the course, we'll talk a lot more about funnels. And as you get into customer validation, now it's not problem solution fit, it's product market fit. And you've got this product you want to bring, is this the right market? You know, are you selling it to the right types of customers? And what is the business model, which kind of bakes in all elements of the business model canvas so that you can be successful. So what we started with last week with the business model canvas is documenting what it is you believe to be true. And these are hypotheses that you then want to go into, specifically these kind of right quadrants here, to ask questions that can validate or invalidate what you believe to be true. Oftentimes, if you ask a good question and let somebody tell you a 5-minute story and you take some good notes, you may come up with new sticky notes you can put on those business model canvases that you had never even thought of before before going through these conversations. And so it's important to note as you go out and plan to do 10 customer discovery interviews, you're not going to ask the exact same questions in all 10 of them. And it should be kind of an iterative question asking process. There may be some that come up in the middle of a conversation because you're actively listening that you didn't plan beforehand that could be useful for this person. You may want to add to other folks. If you talk to 3 people and they all say, hey, this part of your hypothesis is not true whatsoever, it's been fully invalidated, you're confident you're on the wrong track, cut those questions out, add in some new questions. So the 4 phases of customer discovery, you're starting with your hypotheses, you test your problem hypotheses, you test the product concept, and you verify and you kind of lap through again and again. So you're basically applying the scientific method. Like you guys probably took biology or chemistry in high school and had to go through labs where you'd have these ingredients, you'd go through an experiment, and then you'd collect some data, you'd analyze the results and come up with something. That's what you're doing in a startup environment. I went to Georgetown. I technically mastered science by studying computer science. So I know a thing or two about how to do these experiments, and I want you to take what I think in kind of elementary sciences is a very rigid, like you copy this lab and you add 2 of this and 1 of this and you see what happens. And then every student is turning in the same lab report. Your labs are all going to be different. You're all going to have different experiments, and you are the captain of your own ship to figure out what it is you want to test and to have these hypotheses that may or may not make sense. But then get out and talk to people to really understand in the wild how real of a problem is this, how viable of a solution is it, and really focusing on what is your riskiest assumption and thinking about the thing that you think is true, and if you're wrong, really screws up your entire business. Notice in the bottom right, he is focused. When you are in a customer interview, you are focused on the customer. It's not a time to multitask. I encourage you, if possible, to try to come up with some ideas with either other classmates in this class or other friends or roommates or even family members. You want to get your dad involved. I've had so many good startup idea combos with my dad. We're like, what's this a thing? I don't know, to see if you can get a wingman or a wingwoman to join you in the customer interviews. It works a lot better when you have a buddy who can take notes so that you can just be focused on talking and smiling and nodding and actively listening. In a non-COVID world, these would all be in person. I'm going to strongly encourage you do them over Zoom or Google Meet or FaceTime, anywhere where you can see the other person's face. It is really helpful to pick up on those nonverbal cues, and especially their eyebrows. I call these the incitometers. When you say something, everyone's like, oh, wow. And I just saw a couple of your guys' eyebrows pop up. You're like, whoa, okay, this is interesting. You don't get any of that when you're over the phone. Maybe you hear an inflection in their voice, but that's a little bit harder to read than the actual this, or if like somebody crosses their arms, like, oh, it's a bad idea. If they're shaking their head or they're nodding and they're leaning in closer, then they're pretty excited about what it is that you're talking about. And you want to avoid confirmation bias. I think one of you kind of touched on this earlier, that you don't want to lead them to exactly what your idea is. So create the space for them to speak their truth. All right, I'll just reveal it. So these are segues. There was a period in time where human beings thought these things were going to be the new Tesla. Like this is how humans were going to walk around or travel. They raised more than $100 million. They created factories and manufacturing supply chain where they could make 10,000 Segways in a week. They skipped this entire step. Nobody had a problem that needed to be solved by a Segway. And in 2 years, they sold 6,000 of them. Not 60,000, not 600,000. They sold 6,000, and they could make 10,000 in a week. Okay, this is a classic example of a catastrophic failure and of some tech entrepreneurs thinking they're smarter than their own good and losing a shit ton of money. So we're going to start real small, and we're going to talk to a lot of people before you all build giant factories and raise millions of dollars. So best practices for interviewing properly. Ideally, you're meeting as a group with a primary interviewer and a note taker. You can do both. If it's over Zoom, you can also ask, yeah, Maya, what's your question?
Oh, I was going to ask, maybe you're about to answer this, so maybe I jumped the gun on this, but with Zoom, like you can record and it transcribes. Would that, like if you're going to do it by yourself, is that what you would recommend?
That is a phenomenal recommendation, absolutely. And the caveat to that as well is that you should announce to the person you're interviewing and ask their permission to record it and say, hey, is it okay if I record this? You know, I'd love to take notes, it's really important, but I want to focus on the conversation with you. And if I can record it, then I can go back and watch it later. That way they give you the green light. You can also, if they're worried, be like, I'm not going to share it with anybody, you know, make them feel confident. You don't want to be like having a recording and they don't know that they're being recorded. But you can also do it on your phone. If you ask people, hey, is it okay if I just record an audio file so I can listen to this later? And oftentimes the second time through, you'll pick up on some new insights. You want to be transparent. You're asking for help. You guys have this magical sentence where you can say to anybody, hey, I'm a college student. I'm working on this project. Can you help me with my schoolwork? What grown adult or person like doesn't want to help you? So I would leverage that. And I say that too, because it's a lot different than being 35-year-old and being like, hey, I'm the CEO of this company. Can I interview you? Then there's like a different lens. It's not as much like, oh, this is free. Everyone's like, oh, maybe they want to sell me something at some point. You know, if you can approach it just as like a social scientist doing experiments to try to research a potential problem and solution. And, you know, if you can figure out a way to do them in person, socially distant with a mask, that's great. If not, just try to leverage some sort of video connection. So there are some different hypotheses here that you can think through. And by the way, these slides are all in the weekly plan. As always, all the slides are up there, and I'll post the video within 24 hours each week, so you can have it. So there's the persona hypothesis, who is the customer, the problem hypothesis, what matters to them, value hypothesis, will my proposition win? Like, am I creating enough value that somebody wants to switch from their old way of doing it to this new way of doing it? Is it usable? And ultimately, how do I, the growth hypothesis, I'm going to change up on that a little bit. There's this idea of product market fit. Your growth hypothesis is actually channel market fit. And what is the channel in which you're going to grow and usually market it to a much larger audience? And that's like once you have secured product market fit, which is well down the road for growing what it is you're working on. So the base of this pyramid, as you can see, is customer discovery. Once you have a solid foundation of customer discovery, you've talked to tens, if not 50 or more than 100 folks, you're sure that you're solving a problem or a pain point that the majority of users and customers have. You're going to provide value to them, and then ultimately you can build a successful business. So who do you want to talk to? You want to talk to literally everyone. And depending on if your idea is a B2C business to consumer, you're selling to individuals, that one individual may wear most, if not all of these hats. If it's a business to business solution, there's lots of different stakeholders involved in it. And you want to understand how these different people are involved, because who makes the decision, who's going to use it, who's going to allocate the money, who's going to tell their friends or tell the other people in the decision-making process that it's a great idea, who's actually going to write the check or swipe the credit card or send you the Bitcoin. to buy it, who can influence it, and who can sabotage it. This is a brief look at different types of segmentation. And I want you to be thoughtful and to also come up with hypotheses about, the different types of geographic, demographic, behavioral, or psychographic characteristics of the people that are in your primary early adopter bucket of people who might be interested in your solution, and thinking about, what's their age, what's their occupation, how much money do they have? Is this really expensive? Is it affordable? And I think the most interesting of these 4 buckets is the pink one on the psychographic ones. And I'm not going to wax poetically on psychographic things because I'm not that smart. I am going to say go to Wikipedia and look up psychographics if you don't know that much about them, and really understanding the sort of lifestyle and what is a day in the life like of somebody whose problem you're trying to solve, and then thinking about how you can get in front of larger and larger groups of people that have overlapping interests and characteristics. Does anybody have any questions about the different types of segmentation and how that applies to finding early adopters? All right, and I also want to take a moment to define early adopters as like the first 10 people who would buy this thing. It's not the masses. This is not a Super Bowl commercial because it's ready for prime time and everybody's going to want to buy it. You're not trying to market this to everyone. It's like, who are the people, that really have a strong pain point and may also really have a strong connection to you. Like when I got involved with Wave-borne sunglasses, like our early adopters were my Ultimate Frisbee teammates and my Georgetown classmates, right? They were people that I knew who liked sunglasses and liked me and liked helping people. And that was a way to kind of get them on board. Over time, you're going to expand from early adopters. And there's kind of this like pit, because you got this early group, if it's like a bell curve where it goes up in the middle. So your first like 10%, how you get them is going to be different than how you get the next 40%, which is different than the next 40%. And then you have this like 10% of laggards at the end who may never do it, and that's fine. Because your goal isn't to sell something to every human on the planet. It's to really narrow in on specific customer segmentations and focus on those niches. So here are a few example questions that you can include in your customer interviews to understand where, how, when, why somebody made a buying decision. Not all of these may be relevant for your ideas. And I'm going to give you a 60-second warning here that I want you to start thinking about one of the ideas you've come up with so far, because I'm about to put you guys in breakout rooms in pairs where you will do a customer interview and you have about 10 minutes. So 5 minutes for you, 5 minutes for your partner. Whose ever middle name starts earlier in the alphabet will go first. And I'm going to stop sharing so I can get you this link. So think about one of your ideas, and I'm going to give you a script, which I will put in the chat, and then we'll get breakout rooms rolling. So open that link up. If you want, you can save a copy of it, because it will be very helpful as you go out and do your customer interviews to adapt specifically number 4, which is a bunch of open-ended questions. And you're going to practice this whole thing through. Little intro. If somebody introduced you, give a shout out to them, or, hey, I'm so glad so-and-so put us in touch, because at the end, you're going to ask everybody for referrals. Give them a short background on the project. You don't want to tell them all about your solution, though. The goal is not to tell them what you're building at the beginning. It's just to I want to talk to you about, the types of clothes you wear, but don't tell them you're making a new type of hoodie that's also a fanny pack or something, which would be awesome if you did that, by the way. There is going to be one room here. Actually, I'm going to redo this. One of you is going to be with me. So we've got exactly 20 people. I will hop in room number 10. You're going to have 10 minutes on the clock to go through this. Does anybody have any questions about the activity? And hopefully I have stalled enough too, so you have an idea in mind. Awesome. We're going to open all the rooms. All right, welcome back. We'll give another 10 seconds for Zoom land to pop everybody in. So we'd love a couple volunteers to share how did that go and what worked well and maybe anything that didn't work well with your first foray into customer interviews here. Jacob?
Yeah, so I was with Nicholas, and I think something he did really well was kind of like something that the video talked about, which was like confirming what you say back to the person you're interviewing. It's like I answered a question and he would kind of echo what I said in a different way to make sure like he had heard it right or that he was understanding my needs, which was really good. So I think he did a good job of focusing on the customer needs as opposed to kind of jumping to the solutions phase. So I think that was something that I learned and definitely I'm going to try to implement for the next time that I do it.
Awesome. That's a great one. And short phrases like it sounds like, it seems like, it looks like, what I'm hearing you say is really valuable to confirm what they said and to also make them feel heard and like, oh, okay, this person's really listening to me. What else did people find from doing their first interviews in the breakout rooms? Yeah, Kai.
We found that, especially when trying to relate and hear other people's stories, that it's easy to get on like related tangents, but tangents nonetheless. So we started talking about like other software that's helpful, but then realized we didn't have really enough time to really get into like the meaty part of the interview. So making sure that you engage in like a respectful way in listening to their comments, but also continuing on and making sure that what you need to share is said during the interview.
For sure. And I think this was tough too in a 5-minute window. And so you might want to try to schedule them for 15 or 30 minutes. And you want to be respectful of people's time too. If you say, hey, it's only going to take 15 minutes and it's at 14 minutes, and say, hey, we're almost at time. I'd love to learn more. This is such a riveting conversation. You're so smart. Stroke their ego a little bit. Do you have an extra 10 minutes that we can keep going? Most people will say yes. So I think that can help too, because part of the fun is you're going to go on those tangents that you didn't expect to go on and might find some interesting things there. How about you, Nicholas? What did you find?
Yeah, I think something that I maybe is an issue is sort of, asking leading questions. Maybe I did that a little bit in terms of like you have the answer and the product in the back of your mind, but maybe it's hard to distance yourself from what you think is a solution and from understanding the actual problem.
Yeah, for sure. Another type of question we didn't talk much about though, which is good to add to your toolbox, is the on a scale of 1 to 10, how satisfied are you with your current solution? And then what would make it a 10? And two things you can do to make it even more interesting is you can tell them that 7s are not allowed, because 7 is a cop-out answer, and there's a big difference between a 6 and an 8, which makes it more interesting. Another 1 through 10 lesson I learned recently from a master class on persuasion was when you want to get somebody to do something, and in this example, the presenter was talking about trying to get his high school son to clean his room. When you want somebody to do something, you can ask them on a scale of 1 to 10, how motivated are you to do this? And then instead of asking what would make it a 10, you go the other way and you go, why isn't it a 1? And suddenly people start to think about like small things about why, he's like, even if my son gives me a 2, why isn't it a 1? He's like, well, I couldn't find the outfit I wanted to wear last week, and I lost one of my homework assignments. It was just under a bunch of dirty clothes. And they start to internally come up with reasons why they're motivated to do the thing that you want them to do. So there's a little trick for asking them 1 to 10 questions. Can I get one more student feedback on how the customer interviews worked? And then we'll just wrap up and take a look ahead to next week. Yeah, Alex, go for it.
So I'll say I didn't actually get to do my customer interview, unfortunately, because my doctor called like right as I was talking, and then someone else called right after that. So it was just a lot all at once. But basically my experience with customer interviews, which I've done in the past, is that they're such a great resource to actually connect you with people who can pool resources or investments or often advice for what you're doing. And like really I was like at first not receptive necessarily to what they're having to say. And then when I sort of started opening my mind to hearing more to what the potential customer had to say, I found like they can really shape the direction of your enterprise. And often like taking their advice early on can be a make or break aspect or defining feature of your company, of your startup.
Fantastic. That is a great point. And I'm going to share my screen here to wrap up class for tonight. So here is a look ahead. As we talked about at the beginning of the semester, we're going to have 5 asynchronous classes. So I will not see your beautiful live faces here in Zoom land for 2 weeks. At some point in the next 2 weeks, the ask is that you watch the lecture on habits, which in my biased opinion is phenomenal and was one of the best lectures I think I've ever given, with some things that will help you as an entrepreneur and a lot of things that will help you as a human being, both while you're in school and as you think about life after school. And I will put a very short habits quiz on Canvas. It will be like 5 questions. When we have these asynchronous quizzes, I am not trying to trick you up. I'm just trying to make sure you watch the video and then I know it's done and you get a star next to your name for the week. The other assignment over the next 2 weeks is to complete at least 10 and up to 30 or more if you want to, customer discovery interviews for one of the ideas you've come up with this semester. You can pick any idea you want. I'm also open and encourage you to pivot to different ideas if after a few interviews you realize it's not that good of an idea. That's fine, go to a new one. So it doesn't have to all be for one. You might even want to try out a few and talk to different people. And the scripts that we just went over, you can save a copy of those and type up some questions that you can then use to guide those conversations. You can earn extra credit by attending the Big East pitch competition next week. It'll be right after our normal class time, and it'll be a great opportunity to see student entrepreneurs from other universities. You can also cheer on Rebecca Cox with Project OLAS, who'll be representing Georgetown at the event. Yeah, Pia, what's your question?
I just had a question about the interviews. So can we, like, if we kind of want to work with someone for our like project and like what thing we want to make, can we do the interviews together? Is that okay?
Yes, you can. That is absolutely okay. I will encourage you to try to do more than 10 and like take turns on who's the note taker. Don't just like have one person ask questions 10 times and somebody takes notes and think the note taker's done, because I want both of you. But yeah, you're encouraged to have other people involved, and they can be in this class or other humans on the planet as well.
Should we like let you know if we're gonna do that? Should we send you an email or anything, or is it okay?
Sure. Send me an email, and yeah, I'd be happy to know what the teams are and what the ideas are as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
Cool. And then the 2 readings we've got set up there, those are due within the next 2 weeks. If you want to do them in the next week, that's great. But part of the goal of having these asynchronous weeks is I'm giving you more autonomy to take care of your assignments when they fit into your schedules. And that wraps it up for this week. So thanks, everybody. Appreciate your time and attention as always. And I hope you have a great rest of your week.